Hi, Dory. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and your work at LSE?
Hi, I'm Dr Sallai. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Management. I teach undergraduate, postgraduate and executive courses on change management, leading change in the age of AI and AI in management. And I'm also the AI lead and chair of the AI working group.
So currently your research and teaching focus is on AI leadership. Now, what motivated you to look into this, and is it something you've always been interested in?
It is something that I've always been interested in on the tech side. I'm quite techie, so I like technology. And when ChatGPT kind of marched into our lives, I was teaching change management. And my first question was, how can we be authentic in teaching this subject if we are not embracing the technology? The university was banning the use of AI, and I was really driven to create a safe space for students to pilot and try to use these modern technologies. And that's why I thought I need to learn. So I educated myself on this, and then I started to be leading the work within the department about how we are tackling the challenges that AI is providing us with. How can we help students engage with these technologies? And then gradually, I turned my attention to executive education because I felt that it's a really important subject, not only for students and educators, but also for business leaders.
So focusing on business leaders, you've written that AI transformation is fundamentally a leadership challenge rather than a technology challenge. What do most leaders still misunderstand about AI today?
AI technology is really different from previous digital technologies. It requires changes within the whole organization. So it's not just a system that you implement through an IT-led project and then you train the people to use it and then it's done, because these systems are actually making choices, making decisions, and therefore would change the processes within the organization, not just the processes, but also the decision-making requirements. How we are relating to this technology is really important. So therefore, when AI systems, especially generative AI systems, are rolled out, the biggest challenge is that a lot of the times leaders handle it as a technological change and not as a human or human-centered change. And the importance here is that, or the problem, let's say, is that most organizations roll out these systems because they want to address some challenges within the organization, for instance, cut costs or become more productive, when they kind of forget about the fact that these generative AI systems will actually change the dynamics within the organization about how people are making decisions, how people work, what their tasks are, how they are collaborating in teams. And these are the real questions that we have to think about when we think about AI systems. So it's not really, yes, technology is important, obviously, but it's not only about the technology. It's about how people relate to this technology and how this technology rewires our behaviors, our communication with each other, our systems and our processes. And this is why it's a leadership challenge.
And why do you think those kind of cultural organizational changes have received far less attention than just what AI model you're using or just how your organization has AI infrastructure implemented?
Possibly because the pressure comes from the tech industry that organizations are adopting these systems. And therefore, the narrative is mostly about the systems themselves, what they are good for, what they are helping with, and most of all, how much cost they can cut and how much efficiency they can bring to the organization. But because we are focusing on the technological side, because the narrative is driven by the media and the companies who are producing these systems, and the media is actually just giving them space to talk about their systems, which is fair enough. But then we forget about the real organizational and human sides of the debate, which is basically about focusing on the role of leadership, the role of the role of ethics, for instance, the role of governance, those really important things, the role of regulation, those really important things that would make an AI transformation and an AI-driven transformation successful or a failure.
You used a phrase there just before that you've used in some of your writing, human-centered. And what does a human-centered approach to AI look like in practice?
So this is a great question. And I was thinking about writing about this again because I wrote a couple of years ago and I think the debate moved on a little bit. So today, people like to call a lot of systems or transformations human-centered when they are not actually that. So putting people in the center for me means that really caring about how you are rolling out systems and really thinking hard about how those systems will be used, how those systems will change, how people feel in their jobs, how they are relating to each other, how they are doing their everyday tasks in the workplace, and how these systems might change their not just their relationships but also their agency, their control over their data, over their outputs, over their creations, even their IP. But it's silly things like over their voice or biometric data as well. So really, human-centric means that you have to think about how people will relate to this technology and put them in the center. And I don't think it's happening right now. A lot of organizations are very proud of their human-centric approach, but human-centric for a lot of organizations still means metric-based approaches and measuring the work, for instance, of people and kind of more the surveillance side of of the technology. Whereas in my understanding, human-centric means how can you create psychological safety? How can you create a space where people feel free and happy to experiment, where people are okay to fail, where people are constantly open to learning and feedback, including the managers and the leaders. And those are the big questions. When you are thinking about human-centric transformation, you have to start with the leaders because they are creating the environment, they are creating the culture, and they are creating, with their own behaviors, the role modeling, the behaviors, they are creating the norms and the values. So if leaders don't understand what human-centric means and they are just focusing on using these systems to get people to better perform in their jobs, but they don't really care about how these systems change the experience that people have in their jobs, then we cannot talk about human-centric transformation.
And you mentioned there about building a culture of psychological safety. In practice, how could leaders build trust in AI in their organizations when the technology is changing so rapidly?
Well, it's not just that it's changing so rapidly, but also that it's a black box. So, most of these generative AI systems that we are talking about in organizations today are systems that create outcomes in a way that nobody really understands how they come up with those outputs or outcomes. And that black box nature really makes it really, really hard for leaders to create psychological safety, because I just ran a course for a group of students and I asked them, what is your biggest problem with AI? And 75% of my students in the room said that it's the reliability and that they cannot trust the output. Now, it's not a representative sample, but it kind of gives you a random sample of students from a variety of different backgrounds feel that they cannot trust the AI output. Imagine yourself, you are as a leader rolling out a system that will impact on people's everyday lives, maybe their livelihoods, maybe their promotions, maybe their careers, how they are doing their everyday tasks and how they are communicating with each other. And you cannot actually trust that it will give you the right output. So that puts leaders into a really difficult situation. And that's why I think it's really important to think about how we are rolling out these systems, because we have to make sure that if we have these issues like the black box nature, how can you create psychological safety? Well, by letting people know what the shortcomings are. And what I feel is happening, and there is this mismatch today, that there is a lot of selling within organizations. There is a lot of push because of the narrative of productivity and cost cutting, and you have and also competitiveness. A lot of organizations and leaders feel that we have to get on the bandwagon so that we don't lose out. We are showing it to our investors, to our boards, to our clients, to our customers that we are doing this. Yes, but people will only engage and will only use these technologies in a productive and useful and constructive manner if they can trust the output. So how can you do it? First, educate yourself about the technology. What does it mean? What are the things that you cannot control? And then make sure that you introduce these technologies in ways that they will not harm people, that they will be genuinely constructive and useful and productive and creating productivity rather than creating havoc, harm, and serious ethical problems down the line.
That sounds like it speaks to something you've written about in your articles before, which is leaders equipping their teams with the right skills to use AI. And I think trusting the output of an AI might be due to not understanding that the output isn't reliable. So it's a big part of this implementation, making sure people have the skills to understand what they're getting from the AI can help expedite their tasks, but shouldn't be trusted as a truthful output.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the biggest challenges with these systems is that they are packaged as intelligent. And they are also packaged in a way that we tend to humanize them. So those systems that are giving you in-text answers in our natural language, or even talk to you like Alexa and all of the others that have voices as well, they create the impression of a human being on the other side of the computer. And that creates this really big misconception that you can trust without any problems the output. And there are contexts where the output of generative AI systems can be reliable and trustworthy, and if you introduce them in those contexts, then they can be really, really super useful. But yes, people need to know where these contexts are, and leaders who are rolling out these systems or making decisions about the investment of these systems, they have to understand. And they don't have to have complete technical understanding, but they need to understand a little bit about the infrastructure, about how the system works, and how you can fine-tune these systems to be reliable. And then also make a real assessment of the impact on the organization and the human relationships and the dynamics when you roll out the system. Because it's not always about trust, it's also about how it affects our trust about each other. So it's not just trusting the technology, but trusting our leaders that they are working for our best interests and not just with surveillance motives or cost-cutting motives.
So before we loop back round to talking about the AI culture and how a leader could implement your new framework on AI to guide an organization, you've described the AI race mentality in the past as being fueled by hype and competitive pressure. How can leaders distinguish between strategic urgency and simply chasing trends with AI?
Amazing question. Okay. So first of all, you have to think about what your organization wants. What are the pain points? What are the objectives that you want to achieve? I think a lot of the problems with AI investment today that we are doing it for the sake of it, just because our competitors are doing it, or because there is a pressure from the board, the customers, or even sometimes from the employees. But you really have to make sure that you understand, is there a strategy behind this investment? In what ways will this new technology that we are introducing contribute to our competitive advantage? How will this technology contribute to reaching our objectives? How will it differentiate us from the others? It shouldn't be about catching up. It should be about differentiation. If you want to be a market leader, or if you want to be successful in this market, even if you are a public sector organization or a charity, it doesn't matter. You have to think about what you are unique in. What is the value that you are creating for the customers, for the market? And then think about how AI can support those goals, let's say. I see that a lot of investment happens the other way around. We are investing in this technology because there is a push, but we don't really know where it will contribute, how will we take the value out of it, I give you a very simple example. A lot of companies in the last 2 years introduced Copilot. Just Copilot was the first that was secure or observed as secure for a lot of organizations. So they kind of rolled those systems out. And most of the executive teams that I had chats with couldn't answer that simple question of what Copilot is helping them with. And a vague answer that, people are more productive is not helpful, because in what way are they more productive? Are they drafting their emails with Copilot now? Or they are making their Excel sheets with Copilot now? Have you actually measured how much time they spent on their emails or their Excel sheets or whatever it is before the introduction of this new technology and then after? So do you have any figures and metrics that you can use to actually measure whether this investment was successful or not? Most of the time, this has not happened. And so what I'm asking my partners that I work with and my students that I teach to think about, what do you want to achieve first? And then let's have a look at how AI can help you in those goals. And if you can answer very clearly, what are the pain points, what are the problems, what are the challenges that this technology will solve, then you have at least a good starting point.
And looking back at some of your previous articles, it looks like the investment in AI infrastructure has been quite significant. You've written about 375 billion being invested in AI infrastructure in 2025, I believe, and that's going to go up in 2026 this year, and that only 25% or roughly a quarter of AI initiatives delivered on their expected ROI in the past 3 years. So if a leadership team has already made an expensive AI investment that isn't delivering value, where should they start getting back on track?
Well, I would say that there are maybe 2 or 3 key issues. First is, in order for these systems to work, people have to use them. So adoption. Look at adoption. What are the adoption problems? What are the challenges that people are facing and why they are maybe not adopting these tools that you rolled out? Or if they are adopting them, how are they adopting them? And which are the productive adoption cases and which are the less productive adoption cases? And then support the ones that are productive, that are creating value. So adoption, look at your adoption rates and adoption challenges. That would be my first point of call if you already rolled this out. And then also I would look at how it affects the organizational dynamics. How do people feel about this technology? How did it change their relationships, their roles? Obviously, it's a little bit kind of the other way around, because you are supposed to do this work before the rollout when you are thinking about AI readiness. And I developed a tool for that as well, to evaluate whether you are ready and how you can prepare people to get ready for this technological shift. But if you already made the decision and the system is already rolled out, then the next problem is to understand, if people are not using it, why are they not using it? If they are using it, what are their problems with the use of it? How does it change their processes, their tasks, their relationships, their dynamics? And where is the time and the effort going? Are there big leaks? Like, are people wasting their time just trying to use the system? Because if they do, you really haven't achieved much, have you? You actually created even more havoc that you had before. You didn't save time for them. So you have to make sure that people are supported. I think a lot of organizations invested in the technology, but didn't invest in the training and the support for people. And sometimes it's not, and please don't just invest in AI literacy. No. A lot of organizations invest in AI literacy. Yes, it's important. Okay, good, tick box. But you also need to think about all sorts of other support, like people need to understand the technology. They need to understand how it affects their roles. You really need to work with teams together to dig down to the nitty-gritty details of their everyday work and how this technology is changing that. And then you also have to think about how it changes, just coming back to the perception of people of how they are in their jobs, so employee experience. Because if you rolled out a system, let's say in sales or marketing, where you are recording your people because you are providing this amazing AI system that records them, analyzes their meetings and gives them feedback, maybe developmental feedback even, but it also is seen by their line managers, well, the question comes, do people feel safe in that environment? Do people feel surveilled more than they did before? And are they worried about their promotions? If you never ask that question, you will never know. So gathering more feedback from people. So think about adoptions, think about training, think about dynamics and employee experience. And the biggest advice I would say to leaders is to look into the mirror. What are your skill gaps? What are your worries? What are your insecurities? And address those quickly, either by getting a coach who will help you with this journey, getting on a course, getting some consulting support. But in either way, fix your own problems, because you cannot lead successful transformation if you are not embracing this change yourself. And I must say that most leaders don't, for the simple reason that it's a scary technology and they haven't got support either. So, we have to be a little bit more patient and caring and supportive with each other in this space.
And it is a scary technology, and I think it's a scary technology for leaders and employees as well. A lot of employees have anxiety around AI implementation and what it might mean for their futures. To help in this regard, you've actually developed your own AI framework, the LEAD framework, to guide organizations through AI transformation. Could you give us a rundown of the framework and how it's designed to help leaders?
Yes. So AI Lead is about how you can equip yourself and your organization to deliver successful transformation. So the first part of this framework is learn, which I already talked about a little bit. You have to think about where we are as an organization in terms of our AI readiness, where I am as a leader in my own skill set, in my own insecurities of this AI technology. Learn about the technology itself, learn about the infrastructure of the technology, and learn about how it will actually, what do you need to introduce this technology? Because a lot of the times organizations want to introduce AI, but their data is not sorted out. So you need to have like an initial investment to actually do the groundwork. And that sometimes that groundwork can take a year or 2 years to sort out your data management, and everything that is spread out in the organization in a chaotic and unreliable form, so that you can't really put AI on top of it. So first, do that groundwork of learning the context, learning about the technology, and making an audit of your own organization. Then the next phase is about equipping yourself and your teams and your organization with the knowledge, the understanding. So there you have the training, everything that we talked about so far. So not just AI literacy, but about for leadership. A really important knowledge in this technological shift is to be able to understand how change is happening in organizations and how people go through change. So understanding change management and be able to lead organizational change is a really important skill set that leaders and organizations will need. I may even argue that all leaders must know what is change management and how do you manage change constantly in an organization, because we are moving into a new phase. We are not rolling out changes one by one in a linear fashion. We have constant change and uncertainty all the time. So you have to have this knowledge as well. Then the next one is about aligning leadership and aligning the different teams. A lot of the times that wasted money that you quoted comes from the fact that you might have good goals, good strategies, but then everybody rows the boat in a different direction. You need to align leaders to have the same goals, to go to the same direction, and actually make the same priority choices. That's the nitty-gritty detail that is overlooked. In a lot of organizations I talk to, they have like a center of excellence in AI, and then they have the different departments. And basically, instead of collaboration, there is a lot of competition. Everybody wants to do their own thing. And a lot of the times, even if you have like governance centrally organized, well, the different departments are just rolling out their own things and their own systems because they think it's better than the central one. So align. And then the last one is deliver, which is basically the last phase of transformation, if you think in a linear term, but you shouldn't, of course. But so deliver is about how do you make sure, which we talked about already, how do you make sure that you create a new culture where learning is part of the deal, where people are treating change as a norm rather than a one-off. How do you create psychological safety? How do you create experimentation culture? How do you create a leadership that can walk the talk? And if you go through these 4 stages or 4 phases, then I think this could be a long work, by the way. Like, this is not a 3-day job, or it's not a 2-month job. It could take 6 months to a year to go through this program. But if you do, I guarantee that you will be able to lead very successful AI transformation projects.
That sounds really amazing and very detailed. What have you learned so far from working with leaders? Is there any pain points within that framework that are particularly stumping them? Any areas where they kind of fall down, or is it starting right at the beginning with the learning?
So what I'm seeing today is different from what I've seen a year ago. I think a year ago there was a lot of chaos. People didn't know what they are doing. I think today we came a long way. A lot of organizations have actually sorted out their strategies. They have their governance more or less sorted out, which is, by the way, one of the things that I wanted to also highlight in my previous answers, but then we deviated from them. That governance is super important. Do you have solid governance? How are you helping people with guidance on how to manage these systems? A lot of the times we have very high level, fluffy guidance and governance, but not very detailed and not very helpful. So governance is key here. But I think what is the most challenging today in comparison to maybe a year ago is how you have a strategy, more or less. You know what you are doing. You implemented some changes already. Alignment seems to be a problem today, and I think a little bit of confusion. So a lot of leaders have invested a lot of time and effort into understanding what systems they might need and where to roll out the AI systems, and they have maybe even prioritized some pilots that they are trying to scale. So we came a long way, but what I see is that leaders are still not able to answer the question rather of where we are heading with this. How can I as a leader lead this space? And how can I align people across these dimensions, to be able to achieve our strategy and go for the same direction? So for me, these are the biggest questions now. People have learned a lot, they've done a lot of changes, but now they have to equip themselves with, how am I going to lead my team through this? This is the biggest challenge today, I feel. And that would fall into the framework, possibly at the E and the A kind of parts. But I would still say that maybe the L as well, because a lot of the times this gap is because people have introduced the technology, but they haven't really understood it. So I would say that's the biggest problem.
Sounds like some organizations are playing catch up. They've invested in infrastructure and then they're having to go back and learn it. But you've also said some have come a long way in the terms of having their governance structures in place. And now it's about kind of aligning the organization in the right direction. In the next 5 years, do you think we'll see another jump? It's changed a lot in 1 year. In the next 5 years, do you think people might be stuck on the D, the deliver?
Yes. So I think the next 5 years will be very interesting because absolutely nobody can tell what will happen. Today, most of the organizations I talk to deal with the phase of introducing agents. So that's the big deal today. And I'm a bit worried about that because we haven't even mastered the non-agentic part of generative AI. And now we are introducing multiple agents within organizations without really a grasp of how they will affect our organization. And what you have to be careful about these agents is, the fact that they are making decisions. So their impact will be a lot bigger and more important than any other systems that you rolled out before. So for me, the next 5 years will be about this. How are we managing this challenge of basically rolling out systems that have huge implications and impact on the organizations, but nobody really knows how to govern them, how to manage the outcomes, especially the unintended outcomes. So when I think about this, I always say that I'm not as much worried about, cybersecurity is very important. And, a lot of people are misusing AI and generative AI tools for tricking people and tricking organizations into, but crime, we always had crime. We have to deal with that. That's like the nature of life. What I'm more worried about is when people are rolling out systems with good intentions, when good intentions create bad outcomes or unintended outcomes that will then make harm on people and organizations and maybe clients and customers. So the next 5 years will be about managing this space. And that's why I really strongly believe that the most you can prepare, the most you can do as a leader, as a student, as a citizen, whoever and whatever you are, whatever role you are in, is to learn, understand, and if you ever find yourself in a decision-making position, make sure that you have enough information to make a sound decision. You have enough information to think critically about the issue and don't let yourself rush into it, because there will be a lot of rushed decisions. And unfortunately, because this is an ungoverned, unregulated, completely Wild West space at the moment, the impact of those decisions will be that they might cause harm, but there will be no responsible and accountable people. And you will be far away by the time this goes into a bad outcome. Be responsible, learn, and think about the impact, and then you will be okay.
I think that's very good advice, Tori. And I think what you said about the agentic AI is becoming more and more true. We see more people implementing agentic AI, which is becoming more autonomous, making decisions for people rather than simply helping them with their tasks and workflows currently at the moment. So it'd be great to maybe sit down again together in a year's time to talk about how AI has moved on in that space. But for today, we can leave it with, if you could leave leaders with one piece of advice about their AI transformation, what would it be?
Learn about the technology, learn about your own skills, and lead with confidence and with people in the center. So with the intention that you are creating something that will help people. Think about how these systems will help your customers, your employees, any stakeholders who come in contact with them, rather than just thinking about productivity, because the productivity narrative is not helpful. It's not going to cut through the noise. It will not help you gain competitive advantage. You will only create value if you are using AI to support your organization to achieve its goals and objectives. And that might be actually not non-tech related. So just be confident and mindful and put people in the center of your thinking. I think in that case, you will be okay.
Great. Dori, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Danny. Really enjoyed this.